India and EU have finalized landmark trade deal, Modi says. UK PM Starmer heading to China, aiming to reset ties. Israel agrees to reopen Gaza's Rafah crossing. 6.8 million people in Britain now living in very deep poverty, report. US, Denmark to renegotiate 1951 Greenland Defence Pact, AFP source. India and the European Union have finalized a major free trade agreement, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said on Tuesday, marking a significant step after nearly 2 decades of negotiations. Modi described the deal as a landmark agreement that will open India's vast market to free trade with the 27-member European Union, India's largest trading partner. He said the agreement would create major opportunities for India's 1.4 billion people and millions across Europe. Modi and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are expected to formally announce the deal and outline its details later Tuesday at an India-EU summit in New Delhi. Trade between India and the EU reached $136.5 billion in the fiscal year ending March 2025. The agreement comes amid a wave of global trade deals, including recent EU agreements with Mercosur, Indonesia, Mexico and Switzerland, and India's own pacts with Britain, New Zealand and Oman. The deal reflects efforts by both sides to reduce reliance on the United States, as relations with Washington face uncertainty under President Donald Trump, who has imposed steep tariffs on Indian goods. An India-US trade agreement collapsed last year. The India-EU deal will undergo legal review over the next 5 to 6 months, with implementation expected within a year, according to an Indian government official. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will travel to China late Tuesday, marking the first official visit by a British Prime Minister since 2018, as he seeks to strengthen trade ties despite ongoing political tensions. Starmer is expected to hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, with issues such as human rights, the war in Ukraine and alleged espionage likely to be raised alongside trade and investment. After his visit to China, Starmer will travel to Japan on Saturday for a brief stop, according to Japan's foreign ministry. A spokesperson for Starmer said the Prime Minister will depart for China and Japan on Tuesday night, adding that discussions would cover a wide range of topics, including economic cooperation. The visit highlights Starmer's effort to reset relations with China, as the UK looks to boost its struggling economy, following a sharp decline in ties under the previous Conservative government. The trip was announced shortly after the UK government approved controversial plans to build a large new Chinese embassy in central London. The proposed site would be the largest embassy complex in the UK by area, and one of the biggest in any Western capital, though it may still face legal challenges and opposition from local residents. Israel said on Monday it would allow only pedestrian movement through the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt as part of a limited reopening once it recovers the remains of the last hostage held in the Palestinian territory. Rafah is a key entry point for humanitarian aid into Gaza. Its reopening is part of a truce framework announced by US President Donald Trump in October, but the crossing has remained closed since Israeli forces took control of it during the war. US envoys reportedly urged Israel to reopen the crossing during talks in Jerusalem over the weekend. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Israel agreed to reopen Rafah for pedestrian passage only, subject to a full Israeli inspection mechanism. The statement said the move would depend on the return of all living hostages and Hamas, making full efforts to locate and return the bodies of those who have died. International leaders and aid agencies have repeatedly called for greater humanitarian access to Gaza. Separately, Israeli forces ordered Palestinians to evacuate several buildings, including schools and kindergartens, in the town of Kafr Eqab in the occupied West Bank, amid a large-scale military operation. Poverty in Britain has worsened, with a record number of people now living in what researchers describe as very deep poverty, according to a report released Tuesday by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The report estimates that around 6.8 million people are living in very deep poverty, the highest level in 3 decades. This is defined as households with incomes below 40% of the UK median after housing costs, equivalent to about £16.400 a year for a couple with 2 young children. While the overall poverty rate in Britain has fallen slightly to 21%, the share of people in very deep poverty has risen to 10%, accounting for nearly half of everyone living in poverty. Child poverty has also increased for the 3rd consecutive year, with 4.5 million children now affected. The report follows the government's decision in November to scrap the 2-child limit on welfare benefits from April, a move expected to cost £3.1 billion and aimed at reducing child poverty. The two-child cap, introduced in 2017, restricted benefits for families with more than 2 children. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation welcomed its removal, but warned that further measures are needed to prevent progress from stalling. The report found that children, people with disabilities, and some minority communities, including Bangladeshi and Pakistani households, are disproportionately affected by poverty. The United States and Denmark will renegotiate their 1951 defense agreement covering Greenland, according to a source familiar with talks between U.S. President Donald Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The source said the discussions include strengthening Arctic security with support from European allies, but stressed that placing U.S. military bases on Greenland under American sovereignty was not discussed. The existing agreement, last updated in 2004, already allows Washington to increase troop deployments on the island with prior notice to Danish and Greenlandic authorities. The United States currently operates one military installation on Greenland, the Pituffik Space Base in the island's northwest, which plays a key role in the U.S. missile defense system. Trump announced a broad framework agreement after meeting Rutte at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, though details were not made public. Rutte later said one outcome of the talks was a shared effort to prevent China and Russia from gaining economic or military access to Greenland.